As its author, Senator Hall, to explain the measure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. The Texas Election Code has been pieced together with changes over time designed to accommodate conveniences like ballot styles, method of voting, and different voting periods. However, these changes were made without meaningful consideration of their impact on election security. What began as a single-day event involving paper and pencil has now evolved into an extended process that includes early voting, voting by mail, and in-person voting, all with different processes and procedures and equipment. Each voting method has a unique set of processes and procedures that emphasize convenience without consideration of the impact of security. But over time, our quest for convenience in the voting process has caused a less secure election system, which in turn has caused people to lose trust in our election process. Currently, we have no way to determine the actual vote for the early voting period. In some counties, that can be as much as 70% of the total vote. Part of the solution is to restore election confidence, to simplify the process by instituting a single uninterrupted voting period governed by common procedures and allowing the use of a single set of equipment, much like what 21 other states are doing. And Mr. Chairman, I do have a committee substitute.
The chair sends up the committee substitute, and Senator Hall is recognized to explain the differences.
Okay. As I begin, let me make it perfectly clear. This committee substitute does not eliminate countywide voting or electronic poll books, nor does it change in mail-in voting. It would simply do three primary things. Establish a single period that would merge what is currently known as early voting and election day voting into a continuous single in-person voting period with no gap in days in between. This would allow for the voting period to have the zero tapes run just before the polls open on the first day of voting, and then the results tapes run immediately after the polls close on election day, thereby securing the vote at the polling location without having to wait 3 or 4 days. It would allow for combining of precincts up to 10,000 voters per location and require that electronic ballots voted in early voting period be automatically tabulated with election day. The average voter will not be aware that most of these changes have occurred. The process will basically be totally transparent to them. But the changes have the potential to make the life of election workers much easier. We have worked closely with the Secretary of State's office and stakeholders and have addressed their concerns in the following ways. There will continue to be exactly the same total number of voting days as we currently have. Countywide voting will continue to be available for convenience for any county that wants to use it. The same equipment will be used from the beginning of the early voting until the end of election day. That means there is no rush to replace the early voting machines with new machines or secure early voting machines for future tabulation. The county has the option to set up as many polling locations as needed by combining precincts up to 10,000 voters. That is up to. They get the choice below that. Locations do not all have to be open. Locations throughout the early voting period, but once a location is open, it does have to stay open through election day. As we all know, the current voting process does not protect your right to ballot to secrecy, and the current adopted policies of redaction is not the fix. The good news is this process will also protect our constitutional rights to ballot secrecy. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to take any questions.
And thank you, Senator Hall. Members, any questions for Senator Hall on 2753?
What do we have? How many do we have? Let's ask the resource.
We'll open testimony on Senate Bill 2753, and the chair calls Christina Adkins from the Secretary of State's office. And after Ms. Atkins, we'll begin calling those who've registered wishing to testify in public testimony. Ms. Atkins, welcome back. Introduce yourself. Tell us who you represent.
Yes, my name is Christina Adkins, and I'm the Director of Elections for the Texas Secretary of State's office.
Thank you. Senator Hall.
I know you've looked at the bill very closely.
Yes, sir.
And we've had a number of issues that we've been working on for quite a while, particularly ballot secrecy.
Yes, sir.
And this approach where counties will be able to determine the size of their polling locations so that they can adopt either countywide voting or election day or precinct voting, because the votes will be reported by polling location. What are your thoughts on that concept?
Yes, sir. As we've discussed a number of times with respect to this particular piece of legislation, allowing counties, giving them the opportunity to combine their locations or combine their precincts if they're precinct-based voting, to have a higher threshold so that they can service more voters with that location can help with some of the ballot privacy issues that our state has been experiencing, because the greater number of voters that are voting at a particular location, the harder it is going to be to identify an individual voter's ballot. And I think one of the other things that we've talked a little bit about was the idea of perhaps looking at what type of information is reported out when we report things out by location. As you know, the Secretary of State's office is required to put our poll lists on our website, the rosters, the individual people that voted. We are currently not indicating on that list the location at which an individual votes, and we've talked about that as being done as a form of protection of voter privacy. And that's something, while it's not specific to this legislation, it supports that idea that when we're reporting that out, limiting some of those data points can help with the ballot secrecy issue.
Okay. And the idea that people have a choice of actually going to their precinct to vote, the polling location that contains their precinct, or they could vote at another polling location.
Yes, sir, that's correct. With early voting, anybody can vote at any location. On Election Day, for those counties that are opting to utilize the countywide polling place program, they would be able to vote at the location closest to their precinct, the one that's typically designed to serve the voters in that area, or they could opt to vote somewhere else. So a voter has the choice as to where they vote.
So we've got uniformity. Instead of having two procedures for early voting, Election Day, and everything, we have one procedure now, single set of equipment that the counties don't have to deploy new equipment for Election Day. They continue using what was deployed on day one for early voting, so it simplifies the process.
Yes, sir. The way I read the initial file bill and this committee substitute both do the same thing. We are creating a single report for the results at the end of Election Day, and that report would include any votes cast at that location, even if that was an early voting location as well. So rather than stopping early voting 4 days before Election Day and taking down the equipment and generating reports, that location is being used through Election Day, and all of the reporting that goes along with it is going to be generated that day. So we would have a report at the end of that day that encompasses everything that's happened throughout the early voting period.
Okay. And one of the things I'd mentioned or talked about was the fact that for early voting, we're only able to run a zero tape. That's the tape that makes sure there are no pre-stored votes in the machine. But when early voting ends, no one is allowed to run that tape because it would divulge votes. So we now have to wait 4 days, and anything can happen in 4 days between the time that tape could be run in the way we currently do it. But by combining into a single event, early voting and Election Day, where the zero tape is run just before the polls open on the first day of voting, but the results tape is not run until the end of voting on Election Day, we would be able to determine as soon as the polls close exactly what the vote were cast in each location, each polling location. Would you consider that to be a significant increase in security?
Yes, sir. From what you've described, we have state law that prohibits the generation of early voting tapes at the end of the early voting period at those locations because of that situation where it would release results before the authorized time. In eliminating that 4-day gap, we're generating one report with all results for that location. And so there is, that report would be generated at the polling place for what I read in this bill. And so that means those ballots aren't being moved. No equipment's being moved, the ballots aren't being moved, they're being left in that secure location until that time that that report is generated. And then the media, the electronic media from that polling location then would be read in another computer to accumulate results, but you would still have that tape that you can always compare back to ensure that the results are accurate.
Would you agree that this will eventually result in lower costs to the counties and less work for them?
I think that's a question you'd probably have to ask our county election officials.
Well, not having to have two sets of equipment.
But I do think that the ability to not have to replace your early voting equipment, to be able to use the same equipment for early voting and election day, which is a departure from what current law says, could definitely have some cost savings for some of our counties.
Okay. Is there anything else that you have seen looking through the bill or what's been put together that you'd like to comment on?
No, sir. I feel like from what I've read of the bill, it's pretty straightforward with what you're attempting to do. And I think that from what you've described, sir, that's exactly what I'm reading in the bill. And
would you agree that what we're doing is almost going to be totally transparent to the voter coming in, that they will not be seeing anything really different other than showing up to the poll and voting?
Yes, sir. I think the only difference that I see for the voter would be the dates of early voting. They would shift just a little bit, but they're not losing any early voting dates with this particular bill. And then as far as the processing of results, those are not things that the voter would be impacted by. So the voting experience would stay the same, but the reports that are generated would be a little bit different.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Hall. Dean Saffarini, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, would this bill shorten the number of days that persons can vote?
No, ma'am, not in the committee substitute.
It would not?
It would not.
And by allowing precincts to be combined, it would lessen the number of precincts, would it not? Or does it allow a county to combine some and add some precincts?
It would be up to the county to make that determination. It does give them some flexibility to combine locations so that they're not having to have unreasonable expenditures and open locations across the street from each other, which is consistent with what our previous law used to be. So this is actually returning certain parts of the election code to what it used to be, to give counties a little bit more flexibility with combining locations. And for some counties, that may result in fewer locations. Some of that is county choice. It's really up to the county to determine what their needs are.
But they could combine some precincts and add new ones.
Oh, yes, ma'am, correct, yes.
It doesn't
correct.
prohibit that at all.
It's not no, ma'am, it is not affecting the county's ability to add or increase locations.
And during this period, would voters be able to vote at any location, or would they have to go to their designated location?
During the early voting period, so up into Election Day, state law dictates that voters can vote anywhere in the county, and that is maintained with this legislation. They can vote anywhere in the county.
That is
then
not eliminated in this
No,
bill.
ma'am, it's not eliminating that. And then I would just specify that on Election Day, it's not changing Election Day either. If a county is opting to use the countywide program and they have applied and been deemed successful through the Secretary of State's office, they'd be able to continue to use countywide, or a county could opt for precinct based on Election Day.
So how would early voting, as we know it, change in this bill?
What it would do is the start date of early voting would shift forward 4 days, and the end date would shift forward 4 days. And so early voting would start on a Thursday instead of on a Monday, and it would end the Tuesday before Election Day. However, under this legislation, while early voting may end that day, we are not closing down those locations, we're not removing equipment, we're not replacing equipment with new equipment. Those locations that are early voting locations would turn around and be Election Day locations as well.
Thank you. I have been told that this bill would eliminate late voting for death in the family. Excuse me, my allergies. That it would eliminate late voting for death in the family.
Yes, ma'am, and that's because that procedure was available for individuals. If you had a death in the family and it occurred after the end of early voting, but before Election Day, those individuals that may have to leave town or take action with respect to, that situation in their family, there was an alternative process for those individuals since they didn't have the benefit of early voting. And so that process has been eliminated because now early voting goes all the way through Election Day. So that law was in place to cover that gap when there were no voting opportunities for that person. It was too late to vote by mail, and there was no in-person voting opportunities. But with this bill, since the early voting period goes all the way through to Election Day, if there's a death that happens within that 4-day period, they still have the ability to vote in person.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dean. Senator Parker, you're recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Christina, thank you for all that you do, and you're always so professional and do a great job in preparing for all these bills, and very grateful to you. Question for you. Based on what you've said thus far, Senator Hall's layout, is it your testimony that this process, as outlined by Senator Hall's bill, would effectively increase the protection of an individual's ballot from an integrity perspective in terms of how they cast their ballot? Is it your testimony that in fact would be the case?
I think it does have the potential to do that, since those early voting locations are going to be staying open through Election Day. That's just more ballots that have been cast at a given location, and the more ballots, the more voters that vote at a given location, the harder it's going to be to identify an individual voter's ballot.
Okay, very good. And then secondly, just from a administrator's perspective, being concerned with all of our administrators around the state and how hard they work and their teams, it also seems like Senator Hall's bill really eases a lot of the burden for them having to shift, to stop, start, shifting equipment. All those things really kind of go away with this model as well. Is that right?
What I would say to that is it is a change, and I think the counties that are here can speak to more specifically how that change will impact their operations in an election. So there is a change there, and there is going to be an adjustment period. But I do think the ability to reuse, or not, I'm sorry, not reuse, but to continue using the same election equipment from early voting to Election Day, I think that can be something that can help ease some of those burdens. The fact that they're not having to go through the effort to break down the location and return all of their supplies, they're doing that all at the same time. It could be something that is helpful to counties, and I think they can probably speak to that.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you, Senator Parker. Any other questions for Ms. Adkins at this point? Very well. Thanks for your testimony.
Thank you.
We'll open public testimony on Senate Bill 2753. The chair calls Dr. Laura Presley. Jennifer Doinoff. And Ed Johnson. Welcome to each of you. Dr. Presley, go ahead and introduce yourself. Give us your testimony. Welcome.
Thank you, Senator Hughes. Thank you, Senator Hall. This is a really, really good bill, and I'm grateful for it. I think what it does, it fixes our result tape issue with early voting, and I think that is a massive, massive win for this, for our state. I just had a chance to look at the substitute today after I arrived here. There is one maybe inconsistency in this with Chapter 127 of the Election Code, which is the Central Counting Station chapter. On page 11, line 5, it says it's section 85.071, and that's delivery of ballots to main polling place. Correct me if I'm wrong, and Secretary of State may correct me if I'm wrong on this. This section really dealt with ballots cast not on a voting machine, and it contradicts the delivery of ballots to the central counting station. So Chapter 85 and Chapter 127 don't really match up, because most of our counties do countywide, and they do a central counting station. And so Chapter 127, Section 127.066 contravenes this section on page 11, because it says in 127.066, when you're delivering ballots to the central counting station, first of all, it has to be done by 2 officers, not 1. And then it's delivered to the central counting station, not the main early voting place. So you may want to look at that and try to bridge that gap. Even today, the main early voting polling place is not the elections office. Sometimes it's just another place around the county, and you don't want to be delivering ballots there. The other thing is, I'd like to just close with this. This does not fix our secrecy issue. We're still going to have it. It may reduce it to some extent, but we are still going to have a ballot secrecy issue, even if we redact the information. The election administrators and the vendors and election employees will still have access to how many people vote. And I know that's another topic for another day, but thank you.
Senator Hall, you're recognized.
But while there is a question about that, I think there is a solution to it. But one solution is they can just go to their precinct and vote.
I would love that. And you know what? What if we
But
had
that's a choice they will have. They will have a choice.
I'm in agreement.
And so the idea was to give people in
Yes.
counties as much choice. If people felt that the convenience of going someplace else and vote is more important than the secrecy of their ballot. If it's the case, I still don't buy that we cannot fix it, but they will still they would have that choice. They could go to their precinct and vote, and it's solved. But thank you for your input, and I look forward to working with you.
Yes, and one more, but voters need to know that it's their choice. And I think voters do not in this moment, and as we sit here today, if you signed the poll book and you had to sign something that said, if I'm the only person from my precinct voting at this location, I acknowledge my ballot is not secret. Voters do not know in this moment that their ballots are not secret if they're voting outside their area and they're the only person at that location. Election administrators still have access to it, election employees, vendors. Voters don't know it, and I wish there was a way we could do a campaign to let voters know that they should choose voting in their own area.
It's their choice. Thank you.
Bless
so
you.
much.
Thank you.
And thank you. Mr. Dornoff, welcome. Introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm Jennifer Dornoff. I'm the chair of Texas Association of County Election Officials and also the Hays County Election Administrator. And I'm here to speak neutrally on the bill. And I want to thank Senator Hall for his work on this bill, along with the Secretary of State's office. And I do agree that this could simplify the process. And I think that the comments that I hear from members, and I just got the committee sub too, so I have not really had a chance to talk to other members about it. But in past talking about this, we heard comments, just logistically, how does this work? How are we going to set up additional polling locations on Election Day? So if the Secretary of State's office comes back up, maybe they can address that. But if not, we would work with your office on that and see what those logistics look like as well. But otherwise, we do think that it could have the potential, if we were raising that threshold of people voting at the location, to help with the ballot privacy issue. And I also agree that we could work on some education to let voters know that that issue is there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks for your testimony. Mr. Johnson, introduce yourself. Go ahead. Welcome.
Ed Johnson here with Harris County Ballot Security too. Great stuff in this bill. Really excited about it. I will tell you, the increasing the size is good and giving counties the flexibility to choose the size. I really like. We also the ability to report by polling location, so you know that you have the complete poll in and can have some kind of audit trails good. And then you're saying that afterwards you could get a precinct by precinct report, so that for people running campaigns and doing other analysis, they would have that information. I think we could also get it to where you could, like 99%, get the ballot secrecy problem fixed. Your You're never going to 100% get the ballot secrecy problem fixed because there always could be one person. You could have a real slow election. You only have one person vote on one day and anywhere, you know. It could happen. But if we kept the time, you know, the date that they voted secret, what day, and then also didn't report, just reported numbers, you could make a complete list of here's everybody that's voted that day, but not by location. I think you could get around to where you could keep it pretty secret where no one could figure it out. One that I would say that still, as we talked, a little concerning to me, is that 4 days in larger counties has been used to transition between early voting and election day. Now, a lot of stuff can happen with the equipment in that time, which I do not like, but that is going to be a change for counties because they transition, they take their staff and use it for getting ready for election day from early voting, so they'll be doubling up. I would really recommend some kind of pilot program. You said had counties that are really on board with this. I would recommend, you know, always like to do things little steps at a time to make sure they work. Maybe have a little pilot program there to make sure we work all the kinks out before we throw it statewide. So, thank you for the bill.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for your testimony. Senator Hall, do you have questions for the panel?
I just want, if we call this Secretary of State's office back up to possibly answer some of the questions.
Would you like these folks to hold tight while I have them at the same time?
Yeah.
If y'all don't mind, keep your seats, and we'll ask Christina Atkins to return to the table. Ms. Atkins, welcome back. Introduce yourself again, and then we'll
My name is Christina Adkins. I'm the Director of Elections for the Texas Secretary of State's office.
get a little closer on the end.
I'm sorry.
No problem. Senator Hall,
better?
you have the panel.
Yeah. Ms. Presley raised a question about page 11.
Yes, sir, I'm aware. So I heard the discussion, and so what I see here is that there's two things that have to happen. So we have to always have a delivery rule for elections in which we're not having a central counting station or elections in which somebody's hand counting. And that's why this delivery rule is in place and has been slightly modified, but it retains that delivery rule for those locations in which we don't have central count, because not everybody has central count. But if you look down at C2, which starts on line 18, let's see here. At the close of early voting at the branch polling place, voted ballots to be counted using automatic tabulating equipment shall be retained or delivered in the manner described by subsection A. So the delivery rules for ballots that are counted using automatic tabulating equipment, these delivery rules are all outlined in Chapter 127. And so you would look to Chapter 127 to put those specific rules in place for this type of election. It's just that we need the language at the top to cover those elections in which we don't use the central count.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers Ms. Presley's question, not to put words in her mouth, but
So we have
other
to,
than nodding of the head.
yeah, line 24 through 26 needs to say 127.066, and I think that's a simple fix. Yeah.
I guess my question, did anybody else have a question that she might be able to answer, clarification?
No, I think the question I had was just logistically what that looks like, or I guess what the recommendation would be for mid-sized to larger counties to set up polling locations.
And what I would say is in this bill, there is nothing that impacts or changes the timelines that are in place for counties now to set up locations. It doesn't prescribe that they have to be set up within a certain time period. I know in some jurisdictions, they'll start setting up a few days before Election Day, those larger locations that may serve a lot of voters. And that's permissible as long as the locations are secure and they're able to securely store any equipment that's there. And I would also add that there are limitations on what can be in these locations. For example, ballots, the ballot paper that's used, certain things like that, the electronic media with the different devices. There are some limitations there on when that can be delivered, but as far as getting your polling locations prepared and set up, nothing in this bill changes their ability to start that earlier.
Okay. And part of the going to the larger polling, allowing for larger, allows a county that may have a few really good places to vote, that they may want to have a larger number of people voting in fewer places. And for those counties that want to do it otherwise, they can adjust their size. It's just that they need to be within 95% homogeneous across the county. And there, so you get a fair and balanced distribution of polling locations. But to give counties more flexibility, that those that might want to have larger and few of them, that's fine. Or more of them and smaller, that's okay too. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And, Senator, is there any questions for any of our witnesses on this panel anymore? Very well. Thank you each for being here. You're excused. We'll continue testimony on Senate Bill 2753. Public testimony is open, and the chair calls Morgan Whetstone, Allison Hoke, Isabel Lang, Emily French, Susan Carranza, Dr. Susan Carranza. And the chair calls Matilda Miller. All right, welcome to each of you. We're going to start over here on my left to your right. And remember on the end, get close to that microphone. Introduce yourself and go ahead.
Hello, my name is Isabel. I'm here against the bill. Reading through it, there's a lot there, and I think what concerns me is that I'm not sure that they're replacing early voting with something else or completely doing away with it, or and same thing with mail-in ballots. And I think any amount of friction that is increased between voters and voting tends to lead to people who don't want to, who can't show up or won't show up. I think about my grandmother who was bedbound, for close to 10 years, who needed the mail-in ballots and whatnot, and we had to do that. I mean, there was no way to get her to the polling centers or anything like that. So I think any kind of shift like this. I mean, I know it was said that this would be transparent, but I'm not. I mean, just reading over it, it's I don't know how many pages of really dense legal text that, to the average person just is hard to parse out. And I'm not sure how this is going to interact in the future with other voting laws, like the real ID stuff, and all of that is it's a big concern to me. I don't know where this puts us in general. Especially the testimonies before seemed to be in the details, but not the larger picture. I wasn't able to get a really good grasp on what the points of contention were.
Thanks for your testimony. Ms. French, welcome. Introduce yourself and go ahead.
Hi, I'm Emily French. I'm representing Common Cause Texas. I registered against the bill, but my concerns have been resolved by the committee substitute. So I'd like to thank Senator Hall and change my registration to on.
We will note that. Thank you very much. And go ahead.
That's all I've got.
Very good. Thanks for your testimony. Thanks for being here. Welcome back. Introduce yourself and go ahead.
Hi, my name is Allison Hoke, and representing myself, and I oppose Senate Bill 2753. Not every Texan finds polling locations accessible. 12% of the state's population, or roughly 3 to 4 million Texans, has a disability. Physical disabilities making up a significant part of that percent. Without absentee voting, these people would not be able to make it to polling stations without taking up a significant amount of their time, their valuable time, let alone if the closest polling station is in another town. Now, I did hear that the state would try and open up as many polling stations as necessary, but I'm not sure how that's going to interact with.
Get a little closer so we can get your testimony.
My apologies. Okay. While it may sound like this is meant to prevent voter fraud, I believe this is nothing short of voter suppression. And the passing of this bill will take away the ability and opportunity to help influence the outcomes of our elections for millions of Texans. In order to keep our right to vote, the committee must reject Senate Bill 2753. Thank you.
Thanks for your testimony. Welcome. Introduce yourself and go ahead.
Hi, my name is Morgan Whetstone, and I am opposing this bill. I did have something written to read out, but I don't have it for you guys. But everything that I wrote was already addressed, and I have different concerns now that, from what I understand, what she, not her, but the person you had here earlier, the person in charge of the voting.
The lady from the Secretary of State's office. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
She said that they're moving the early voting to being before and after the actual voting day instead of just before. And I don't understand how that's going to interact with, on voting day, you should have all the votes you need by then to count.
I think what she said was that right now we have early voting here, then there's a gap, and then there's election day. This would just move everything forward. So early voting would last just as long as it does now. It would start 3 days later, and it would go 3 days longer. Not to argue with you, but if that helps, that's really what the bill's about. But go ahead.
And then also coalescing the voting stations, I feel, makes it harder to access than it would be if there were just multiple smaller locations. Those are my concerns.
Well, thanks for your testimony. Thanks for being here. Remember, on the end, you got to get close. Welcome. Introduce yourself and go ahead.
Hi, I'm Matilda Miller. You talk a lot about transparency on this, but I would like a simple yes or no question, or a simple yes or no answer to a question about what's right at the top of this bill that states that it abolishes absentee voting. Does it abolish absentee voting?
Senator Hall, go ahead, if you wish.
Is that a yes or no?
No, it does not.
Then why does it say that at the top of the bill?
I think you don't have this committee substitute. You have the original.
Okay, thank you.
So then why is it that when I go onto the texaslegislature.gov site, this is not the bill that comes up?
This is the committee substitute that we just got back from Ledge Council over the weekend.
Mm-hmm. And it's Monday. Y'all are only required to give about 48 hours notice for these meetings at the minimum. I mean, 3 days is generous. I saw that this hearing was scheduled on a Friday, so if you can update the bill, you can't update the file in the same amount of time that you schedule and arrange this entire hearing? It seems a little busy.
The hearing is set based on the bill that's filed, and then between that time, there's input from stakeholders and changes are made. So the committee substitute has not been adopted by the committee. It's a proposal. So Senator Hall's committee substitute is the most recent version of the bill. It hasn't been passed either. So right now the filed bill is still there, but the one you've just been handed is the one that we're working from now.
Okay then. Well, there was some talk earlier about security of mail-in ballots. This has been a widely debunked talking point, often spouted, that there is any kind of widespread mail-in voter fraud. And I don't have time to go over the entirety of this bill right here in my 2-minute testimony, but I will say that any removal of opportunities to vote by mail-in, by absentee ballot, absolutely is disenfranchising disabled and working class people here in Texas.
Well, thanks for your testimony. Members, any questions? Senator Hall.
Yeah, just answer a couple of questions. This bill changes nothing with mail-in ballots. This bill changes nothing with absentee ballots. And this bill changes nothing with access to polling locations at all. It has the same opportunities as we currently have. And the issue about moving early voting, it simply moves early voting forward 3 days so that it ends, or the early voting phase ends the day before Election Day. So it's one continuous period of the 12 days of early voting plus Election Day. Same number of days, same locations, same process. It will essentially be invisible to the voter. There are no changes in access. I'm not sure what you heard about before and after. It's just one continuous process, and I've got a handout. Kathy, why don't you?
I was just reading
With
the
a
bill that was
graphic
online.
that explains that for you. So to ask you, your major concerns is that it has, for the access is the same. Mail-in ballots are the same. The number of days are the same. The big change is that counties now only have to have one set of equipment. Currently, they have to have duplicate sets of equipment because they have to use different equipment on Election Day than they do in early voting. Now they deploy the equipment one time, and it's there all the way through the end, and they can deploy additionals for Election Day. But as far as the vote is concerned, you'll vote exactly the same way. I doubt that many counties will even change the locations that they've had available, and all of the ADA requirements will still be there. And in fact, it has no impact on them.
Okay.
And if you have any more questions, feel free to call our office. We'd be glad to talk with you about it.
Okay.
All right.
And members, any other questions for this
Thank you for
panel?
coming to testify.
We thank each one of you for being here. Everyone's input matters, so thank you for being here. Thanks for your questions. The chair calls Dr. Susan Carranza, Heather Stalter, Arshia Papari, and Lucy Trainer. Trainer, welcome. Introduce yourself and give us your testimony.
Lucy Trainer. I am representing self, but I also represent SD25 on the SREC with Travis and Bexar counties as part of our district. And in the past, in the last several years, I've worked with different county chairs, and particularly urban county chairs, who would really like to see our state go back to precinct-based voting. And they see that as the only way forward in terms of tracking information and transparency, and ultimately having the grassroots be able to get at some of these numbers and to properly do audits. So whatever we can do to get back to precinct-based voting, I know that the committee sub is something a little different, but I just want to be on record saying that our urban county chairs really need the help of going back to precinct-based voting. And I think that gets us closer to the implementation of the Trump executive order on election integrity, and it would be great for our state.
Hey, thanks for your testimony. Members, any questions for Ms. Trainer? Thank you for being here. Is there anyone else wishing to testify on